Hello and welcome. I hope your coffee is warm because today we are building a very wild color combination, Junt. So Junt, the philosophy of Junt is to kill, to be very strong, to make yourself stronger, and just to be the apex predator of your group. The colors are red for being very aggressive, being very fast, getting haste sometimes and just being in the moment. Black for being very self-centered. You don't really want to think about all the other people. Perhaps you want to destroy them, but mostly you are working on your own game plan. And green, because your game plan is to be a very strong person, a strong player, and have very strong creatures, probably the strongest. The colors Junt is not are very telling too. It's not white, it's not about clean solutions, it's not about being careful or being strategic, which is also why it isn't blue. It isn't strategic, it doesn't think ahead necessarily, and it doesn't really interact that much on instant speed. It just does what it does, and it does it on its own timing. Now, the themes in Junt are very fitting with this color philosophy. We have a lot of dragons. In fact, there are mostly dragons in Junt. We have a lot of murder, people who want to kill, people who want to kill multiple people. And that's basically the flavors you have in terms of philosophy. We have primal monsters, and we have sometimes a little bit less about the killing, but more about the greed. We have the Riveteers too, who are all about working hard for your money, but usually they work together more than anything and work for each other. Which is a bit weird, doesn't seem like it should be in Junt, but it's because they have a very, very strong leader. So what to expect in this video, we will talk about which commanders you could choose, so sort of top 9 we have today. I don't really force myself into a top 10, of course. We will talk a bit about playstyle styles, some staples that always go in, some strengths and weaknesses, and a few combos which really aren't in Junt. We are mostly about being strong and killing our opponents. So let's get into it. Now, before we start with the strengths and weaknesses, I always want to talk about the purpose of the color combination. So Junt is meant to be a deck played by very scary opponents. You always want to be the scary opponent. You always will scare your opponents because you can very easily come back from being removed. Maybe your one creature will be removed, but at the same time you have ramped so much or you have drawn so much from your commander or whatever you played that you will be easily able to replace them. The other purpose is to be very selfless. And this doesn't really seem like a purpose at first, but in some playgroups there is just so much politics going on that someone just has to break the cycle. And Junt is perfect for this because it can really do its own thing. It doesn't really need other people or really won't please any other people. Perhaps it will influence them in that it will force them to attack, or it will force them to use a lot of mana or stuff like that. But Junt will never be about politics in the way that it is not scaring other people. Its strengths are everything. We have draw in black and sometimes red nowadays. We have ramp, of course, in just green, but also the rituals in red and black, so you can go very strong with your ramp. We have removal, at least the ones that destroy stuff. So we have, green for artifacts, but also red and black are just really good at it. And then we have Golgari, which is really good at sort of removal that can target almost anything. And we have board wipes in black and red are very strong colors for it. We are not the strongest, that is Mardu, but we still have a lot of board wipes. And draw, ramp, and remove are the most important anyways. Now, our weaknesses, which are still there, are that we do need some life to draw some stuff. So we can deal a lot of damage to ourselves. That just means that we need to be faster than we are dealing damage to ourselves. We don't really do any countering, so if you were planning on doing that, that is not possible. But of course we have so much removal that we can still play the game. We are a bit weak against Indestructible because we don't really have a lot of Exile or Bounce, which are all mostly in Azorius. And sometimes we are a little bit too good at sacrificing stuff, so you do need to be mindful of that. It doesn't need to be a weakness per se. Our mindset should be that we do not do politics. You don't want to do any of that. We focus on our own game and we are destroying our opponents. We only do politics when people offer us gifts because they are scared of us. You have to feel like you are the dragon. You have to be the strongest and you need to gain value from there. So sometimes this might be the politics, but oftentimes that just means you have a strong thing and now you need to draw some cards and need to make sure that you have something left in the tank for later. And we only destroy the things that are a threat to us. Sometimes we can do a little bit of destroying for the table, but now we are only looking at our own game plan. So if something is not directly threatening us or will threaten us in a few turns, we will not remove it. Starting off the top 9, we have Hearthhull, the Worldseed. In this deck, it's very basic. It's a new Lance Matter Jaunt Commander because it has really been better. So what you do is you station the Hearthhull, meaning you sort of crew it for 2 power and then it will stay crewed basically. And you will get the ability to, for 1 mana, tap the Hearthhull to sacrifice a land, and then you draw 2 cards and you may play an additional land this turn. Now how this works is usually you will get another land, you will be able to play it, and then you will have a net 0 of lands. But of course, this will mean that you will sacrifice a land which you can get value from, you will play another land which you can get value from through landfall. So basically you can do a lot of stuff with getting lands into the graveyard and back onto the battlefield again. Now this is better than Lord Windgrace for having a win con slapped on it. So eventually once you station it for 8+, it says whenever you sacrifice a land, each opponent loses 2 life. This just means it is very doable, unlike an ultimate on a Planeswalker. And then eventually your opponents will die because you are very good at sacrificing lands, getting them back and sacrificing them again. Now also Lord Windgrace can be removed very easily because it is a Planeswalker. It starts at 5 loyalty, but still that is pretty easy to just remove, especially if you use the -3 to return land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now this is another part of the Lance Matter deck that you need, but nowadays there are so many ways to just return your lands that it doesn't really matter if there's one of the pieces that it misses. It's just that winning the game is so much more important than moving the game further. Now you can of course pair Hearthhull with Gitrog-like land sacrificers, and the Gitrog monster is actually very noticeable because it also grants you the ability to play another land every turn. Now this is also very important because you will be drawing a lot of cards in this deck, and if you can play more lands because of it, that just means you are winning the game that much more. Korvold is what I thought would be the most popular one, but this is a sacrifice deck, and that just means that, well, it's a little bit less popular in a sense. Sacrifice decks are very popular, they want to be played, but it's very hard to make them fun for the table. Which also means that when you play Korvold, you have to be very mindful that you do have a win con eventually. Many Korvold players just play it, sacrifice a bunch of stuff, draw a bunch of stuff, and then never do anything. And if you do it like that, well, it isn't really fun for other players to look at. So what Korvold does is you sacrifice a bunch of stuff. For everything you sacrifice, you draw a card and make Korvold stronger. This feels like a win con, but attacking with something isn't a win con, basically. If you have a win con, this is a fine deck again. And you could watch my deck for him for the whole story. I will just keep it at that. Then Coram, the Undertaker, is a mill deck, but in a more fun way. So Coram's main ability, or the one that is to me the most interesting, is that during each of your turns you may play a land and cast a spell from among cards in graveyards that were put there from libraries this turn. So you mill them from their libraries, and then you can play a land and cast a spell from those graveyards. I now feel that land stuff seems to be a very big theme in Junt, but that might just be because it is in green. And it is about big creatures, so you need a lot of lands. I guess that might be true. Coram also has the ability to gain power, where X is the greatest power among creature cards in all graveyards. Now this will probably be around 12 maximum, I think. Maybe... No, I think it's 18, right? The biggest. Well, don't quote me on that. But you can get a very high-powered Coram, but it doesn't have trample yet. So do make sure that you have something with trample. My favorite is Brawn, because it says as long as it is in your graveyard and you control a forest, which you probably will, creatures you control have trample. And it will be very easy to get it into your graveyard, because you want to mill a bunch of stuff anyways. So if you like mill but don't really want to win through it, but through high power, I think Coram is a great commander. Winter is actually a very cool commander. It is from Duskmourn, which means that not many people like its vibe. It's very gothic-like, but it is a really cool wheel deck. And Winter's abilities don't even say wheel or anything on them. It just says, at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws 2 cards. That just feels like a group hug thing, right? But his Delirium ability is that as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, Delirium, each opponent's maximum hand size is equal to 7 minus the number of those card types. Now you can easily get this to, well, not easily, but you could get this to 0 or minus something, which I don't think does anything. But you can get this to 0, meaning that they will need to discard their whole hand after their turn. So they will get 2 cards, which is kind of your drawback, but your opponents will need to get those cards out of their hand as well. Now this feels like a drawback, but it's also the way Winter works. So you have cards like Waste Not, which are ways to improve your game plan whenever they discard a card. But you have even more, because they probably didn't think it was that good at first, even more ways to deal a damage whenever an opponent draws a card. Now this doesn't feel good because your opponent will draw cards, but you know that they will discard them later. So you don't mind them drawing a bunch of cards. Now, having 1 card that deals 1 damage for every card an opponent draws will mean that you deal 7 damage on a true wheel. Having enough of these will mean that you get a bunch of damage. I have counted them, and you can get 15 damage at most in total in pings whenever they draw a card. So that is a lot. I think you will be able to win the game this way, and it feels so wonderfully wrong. The next one is a sort of typo commander, but it doesn't really feel that way to me. Disa the Restless is all about Goyfs, and Goyfs are a creature type, but they are very unique in a sense too. I really am seeing that much stuff about card types in your graveyard, which is also very interesting. But let me explain. Disa the Restless. Whenever a Goyf is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, because otherwise it would be an instant loop when you sacrifice a Goyf, put it into a graveyard and get it back onto the battlefield immediately. So you need to get it in there from your hand by discarding it, or for example milling it from your deck. So in this way, many of these Junt commanders really are so much alike, but okay. This means that you can get some pretty big creatures onto the battlefield very quickly. And whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you create a Tarmogoyf token. So you get more and more Tarmogoyfs whenever you deal combat damage to players, and you will be able to play Goyfs from your library instantly or by discarding them. So there are multiple ways to build this, and I think that is fun. Do note that most, I think, Lurgoys don't have trample. Some do, I know at least one. But yeah, do make sure that you have a way to actually get some damage in there. Now, my own new commander, Henzie Toolbox Torre, is played a bit differently if you look at what he is known for. So Henzie is definitely a toolbox commander where you can play any creature with mana value 4 or greater, give them a bit of a discount, but you have to discard them at the end of your turn and you will draw a card whenever they die, if you have played them for their blitz cost. Now you can still of course play them just normally, but I think this is a very fun choice even. They will get cheaper for every time that you have cast your commander, so Henzie, from the command zone this game. So they will get cheaper and cheaper. This is a very strong deck on its own, even if you wouldn't play it with Birthing Pod. But if you do play it in that theme, it becomes even stronger and you are really focusing on its strengths. So Birthing Pod says for 1 mana and a fraction green mana, so you can either pay green or 2 life for that mana. And tapping the Birthing Pod, you can sacrifice a creature and then search your library for a creature with 1 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put it onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. At sorcery speed, of course. Otherwise it would be even stronger, and it is already so strong. Now, this is a very good card, but it definitely works extra well with Henzie. So what you do is, of course, you blitz a creature out. That means you can attack with it, do all the stuff you want in a turn, and at the end of your turn you would have to sacrifice it. But if you, somewhere in your second main phase, sacrifice it anyway to the Birthing Pod, that is just extra value. Also, it is very easy for you to play a 4+ mana creature. So your biggest... See, Henzie already wants a bunch of 4 to 8 mana creatures in there, but usually you don't really get to play the 8 mana creatures. They will get a bit of a discount, but that still means that they are 7 mana. But in this deck, it is really feasible for you to play those really big creatures. So it really stops the only little bit of weakness Henzie has in not being able to cast 8 mana creatures that well, and really turns it on its head. You do need to be very mindful of the creatures that you have in your deck and how many you have at each converted mana cost, but that's really the only thing I can tell you about this. Another very interesting commander is Yurlok of Scorch, Thrash. This is a commander that gives your opponents mana, so he can tap for 1 mana to give each player 3 mana. Now you will get 1 mana less than your opponents. Now why would you do that? That is because of the first ability, which says a player losing unspent mana causes that player to lose that much life. That means that if you force your opponents to get a bunch of mana, you will deal a bunch of damage to them if they cannot use that mana to play something. Now, of course, you can give every player 3 mana on your turn, meaning that they will have 3 mana that they might not be able to do anything with. But there are more fun ways to force your opponents. We have cards like Mana Flare, which say whenever any player taps a land for mana, it produces 1 additional type mana of the same type. And there are more ways to do this. So you can force your opponents to, when they tap something, maybe make 3, 4, 5 mana every time. That just means that they might not even be able to use the mana of 1 land. Eventually they won't have a hand left, but be careful, your opponent will be very strong in this sense as well. So you do need to make sure that you will kill them if they start going off with that much mana. So how do you do that? Well, cards like Power Surge, which say during each player's upkeep, it deals that player 1 damage for each land. Well, this is very complicated. Well, let me explain it better. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, this enchantment will do X damage to that player, where X is the number of untapped lands they controlled at the beginning of this turn. Now, this means you need to notice this at your upkeep. That means that if you don't immediately tap those cards on your upkeep, because you have just untapped them for your turn, you will be dealt a bunch of damage. So if you then tap all of those lands, you will need to use all of that mana in your first main phase. And that is just very hard for people to do if every land taps for 3 mana. Another way is Korvold the Merciless, so that if an opponent casts a spell, Korvold will deal damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target. Meaning you could also deal that damage to the same opponent every time, so you can help each other kill each other. So it's a bit of politics, but it's also very scary. So I think this goes for Jund. This deck is what comes closest to politicking in Jund. It's Thantis the Warweaver, and it is all about forcing your opponents and yourself to always attack. Now note that forcing your opponents to attack is very good, because then they won't have any blockers. This means that everyone else can then attack everyone else. Only the creatures that you are playing right now will be able to block usually. Now Thantis has Vigilance. This means that you can protect yourself with Thantis while Thantis is also growing. I would suggest getting more Vigilance or other ways to create tokens whenever you get attacked or stuff like that, so that you won't be killed while your opponents are. This is basically very basic politics. And last is Auntie the Cursewretch, which got very popular mostly because it was in a precon, but I still wanted to note that -1 counters are now a Jund thing. So what do? You kill your opponent's creatures with -1 counters, or you draw whenever you put -1 counters on your own creatures, and it's basically that simple, this game plan. Might have almost been, I was debating about it, but Auntie is still a cool card where you can control your opponents if your opponents are up for it. Now, I wonder how you would make it strong enough for a group like that. You can choose your Jund commander with 3 questions. First, do you want to focus on your plan, or do you want to focus on manipulating your opponents? Question 2, big creatures or direct damage? And question 3, do you want to see your whole deck, or do you want to crush your opponents so that they don't have the will to play anymore? Now for Jund, there aren't really any specific finishers. You just play big creatures, give them haste, maybe a Bolus, a Citadel sometimes, but really that isn't the thing. Now, weirdly, you also don't have many specific combos that are in here. Of course, you do have a lot of combos in the normal colors, but in exactly Jund, there's not too much. You have Murderous Redcap and Grimgully the Generous, which means you play Redcap, then deal damage to itself, and it ends with a -1 counter and a +1 counter from Grimgully. We have seen this a lot in Rakdos too, so you can play all of those combos too, but we won't talk about that today. And then you repeat it. So basically you get to play the Redcap a lot of times, and it will die a lot of times, and you will be able to use that to win the game. The other one is a clean 3-card combo, which is Slimefoot and Squee, which is 1 card, Sprouting Threnax and Phyrexian Altar. I did have to reach here because usually I just do the 2-card combos, but Jund really doesn't have many that are specifically Jund. It does have many in Golgari and Rakdos, for example, but and Gruul. But okay, what you do here is you sacrifice both the creatures, so Slimefoot and Threnax, to the altar, and you create like red and black, maybe green. Then you will create 3 Saprolings from Threnax. Then you sacrifice 2 of them, and you add 1 and a green, so that you have 4 mana, so that you can activate Slimefoot, and you will sack the last Saproling for that ability to return both creatures and get another Saproling. Now this means you are 1 Saproling up. This means multiple creatures have died, multiple creatures have entered the battlefield, and you will be able to win the game at least next turn, but probably sooner if you play it right. Now this does mean that you need a bunch of Saprolings in your deck, so this doesn't really go into any deck. Do note that. Now for this segment of building the core deck of a Jund deck, I have made a sort of Architect basic, which you can use to build your own Jund decks. So I won't be going into detail onto every card, just the weird ones. For ramp, the weird one is Ignoble Hierarch. It's a bit of a weird one. It is 1 mana for a creature that can tap for any one of the manas that you need. Any one of the colors that you need. So this is good for multiple reasons. One, it is a creature. Many Junt decks want extra creatures, and this is one. You can also sacrifice it or stuff like that. It has Exalted, which sometimes comes up, which means that whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets an extra power and an extra toughness until end of turn. This works in Junt because oftentimes you have one creature that is very big. And of course it taps for all of the mana that you need, and so it is way better than a Llanowar Elves in that sense. For you. So that is the weird one for ramp. Other than that, I have the basic green ramp package. Now for removal, I have a bit of a weird one in Ziatora the Incinerator. This is a Junt commander sometimes, but it mostly is a great one for sacrificing a creature and dealing a bunch of damage to any target. It is 6 mana, so you would say you could never play it, but many decks in Junt can. It is also a dragon, which is on theme. So at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another creature, deal damage equal to that creature's power to any target, and you create 3 treasure tokens. So you basically ramp, deal damage, can remove something, or kill your opponent through it. It is also a flying 6/6, which you like in Junt. For board wipes, also for removal, we have Rakdos removal and Golgari removal packages, so we are already really set on the quick removal. For board wipes, the packages are blacks and reds. Those are already very good. But in Junt specifically, Chandra's Ignition is also very good. It's 5 mana for a board wipe, but it says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. Now, oftentimes you have very strong creatures, so you can deal enough damage to kill everything. But sometimes the golden moment comes where you have creatures that are strong enough to survive the ignition and your opponents won't, and you will win the game through it. For card draw or card advantage, I would say Korvold is still a very good option in many Junt decks. It's 5 mana, still a big creature that enters, sacrifices another permanent, and then draws you a card, grows Korvold as well. And then whenever it attacks, it draws you another, which makes it very good. And oftentimes in Junt you have many ways to sacrifice a bunch of stuff, and this just works in so many decks that I think I should have, I had to note it here, but it doesn't really work everywhere. Otherwise, for card advantage, you have Black's package and a bit of Red's package as well, but mostly the Black card draw or card advantage cards. Now, some more tips to leave you with. For playstyle, I would say make sure not to burn out your hand and have enough card advantage ready before you sacrifice too much of your board. Also, make sure to stay above your opponent's quarrels and just remove or attack what's a threat to you. Otherwise, you are better off building your own engines. Now, for closing, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I wish you a very nice day.